It is now 3 p.m. I would like to call to order the Richland County Detention Center Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order for May 21st, 2024. Madam Clerk, could you take the roll, please?
Pugh.
Here.
Walker. English.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 2 on the agenda is the approval of minutes from April 16th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Pugh.
Yes.
Walker. English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 3 on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Mr. Brown, is there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No recommended changes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, move to approve.
Second.
Pugh.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right. Item number 4 on the agenda is items for discussion/action. Detention Center update. Mr. Brown, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Members of the committee, I want to just take a moment and cover 3 items for you. I want to first start by looking at item 4A1, which was a letter that we received from the division director from the SC Department of Corrections. And I know we shared this information, but I think it's something that we definitely want to read into the record because it reflects the efforts that have been going on at the detention center from a perspective of someone who provides a review of the center. And I'll just read briefly starting at the bottom of the first paragraph where it talks about having received the response that we provided to the Department of Corrections. They provided us an inspection report. We had to respond to that inspection report. We did that earlier this year. And the results so far of that look like what we see here. The division director says, having just recently received the response letter, we were glad to take a look at the progress that had been made so far at the facility. You may recall that as a part of the ongoing submissions that we provided, that we indicated, we being Richland County, indicated that there had been several steps that had been made. We laid out a specific set of plans. We talked about how we were walking down those plans, and we responded to each of those findings that were presented to us through that plan. And so what you see here is them talking about looking at the progress that was made as identified in the submission. And it says the amount of change and progress toward improvements for the inmates and staff were apparent. The renovations in living conditions, health, and hygiene, along with security upgrades being conducted and already completed, were impressive. There is a definite difference being made, and the facility is certainly on the right track. The improvements already completed, along with the plan we saw in action, will have a great impact on the public service that Alvin Glen Detention Center provides the community going forward. In closing, let me thank you and all those involved for the effort to allow us to come see the progress and for the hard work being put into security and safety of the Richland County Detention Center. And I think it's important just to highlight that because, again, it identifies that we communicated a plan, they saw the plan in action, they saw progress being already completed, and they saw additional things happening. So I think that is a testament to not only what the staff of your staff has been saying to you, but an outside agency reviewing this information and then also providing feedback and input. So I did want to share that letter and add it into the record, Mr. Chair. We'll take any questions that you may have before we move on to the next item.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Brown. Can I pause for a second and recognize my colleagues that joined us that are not a part of this committee? We like to thank Madam Chairwoman Jessica Mackey for joining us. We also have Councilwoman Allison Terratio, and then we have my partner in crime, Jason Brenham, who decided to join us as well. Thank y'all for coming. And we have Councilwoman Shakise Newton, who's joining us via online. Does anybody on the panel have any questions or comments?
I want to say what I've been saying. Wish I could thank you. I know it's been
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown, for the update. But let me ask you this, Mr. Brown. What exactly does that letter mean?
Yeah, so I think what the letter means is that just like this is the same agency, the South Carolina Department of Corrections, and the same division that performs inspections and audits of jail and prisons in South Carolina. And so for that same division to provide this correspondence, I believe reflects that they identified that the work that we said was happening is happening, that the progress, the steps, the plan that's been implemented is something that is real and is not just information provided by the county in response, but rather it is a true plan of action, and then they see it taking place, and that they are confident that we will continue to move in the right direction and get an end result of ultimately having the type of facility that we are looking to have.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving on to item 4A2.
Yes,
Mr. Brown.
sir. Under item 4A2, what this is a request for the committee to consider closure of the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center Juvenile Detention Center. So not the facility itself, but the juvenile facility. And this kind of comes to us as a part of looking at the operations that the county is responsible for as Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center, and trying to determine where our best focus should be. If you notice in all of our inspection reports, the focus really is on mainly the adult side, because that's what the county is responsible for. We are responsible for providing detention services for adults here in Richland County. At some point in time, I'm not sure when, the county, also decided to, voluntarily stand up a juvenile center, but that's voluntary. That's not something that Richland County as the agency is ultimately responsible for. So when you look at the challenges of the staffing, when you look at where we can best utilize our services to do the things that we're responsible for doing, it makes sense for us to consider anything that we're doing we're not responsible for, whether or not it makes good sense for us to continue on those efforts, knowing that it has been identified that is a struggle. So one of the considerations about this would be similar to what Greenville did. Greenville had the same issue. They basically said, listen, we have to be responsible for the adults. We have individuals on the juvenile side that we're not responsible for. We can take that staff and help positively affect our staffing issue at the facility by temporarily closing the juvenile center down and moving that staff to the adult side so that we can try to meet the standard that we're responsible for meeting on the adult side. So this conversation, this request is to have that dialogue, to talk about, whether or not it makes sense for us to continue to stand up an operation where we don't have direct responsibility for, knowing that there is already an identified staffing issue at our facility, as well as just in the business in general. So that's why we're having this conversation. It's an operational consideration because it's not something where we're maximizing the focus on things that we're responsible for. We're picking up ancillary duties that are not our charge, which is leading to additional stress on our system that we're responsible for.
So, right, is there any legal advice we may need to go into executive session to discuss?
I don't think necessarily at this point, given the fact that Mr. Brown is just kind of laying out the situation in general and for your consideration about the closure. If something that comes up that may have some legal implications, I'll interrupt so that we can go into executive session. That being said, I will say that this, as far as the potential closure, I believe that the effects to the families or law enforcement would be even less than, say, Greenville, since DJJ is in Richland County. So it's not like the people would have to travel farther somewhere else, it's still in Richland County either way.
Anybody got any questions, concerns? Ms. English?
I don't really have any questions, but I was trying to, when I received the letter, I was trying to think of the pros and the cons, and I really felt like this was extremely insightful. Not so much in getting us out of trouble or anything like that, but very insightful as to how to reconstruct the jail, how to get things moving, and I know that's something that Director Harvey has been pushing for the longest. So this assists us in keeping youth in a recognized youth facility. It gives us the ability to utilize space, the ability to have better staffing to cover who is there. It takes away those, as you says, those ancillary duties that were not really assigned to us. And I'm trying to think of any negatives, but I haven't come across any. So if anyone would like to help me out, I was just, and I wanted to thank you because I really do think that this is insightful.
Mr. Brenham, you recognize?
Yeah, I'm not going to help you out with any negatives, but I've just had a couple more questions to see if you had the answers to them. So just to say it out loud, if we close down the Juvenile Detention Center at Alvin S. Glenn, the state DJJ would hold these detainees, juvenile detainees in custody. Is that right?
Yes, sir. The state, the DJJ, the Department of Juvenile Justice, is the one that's statutorily charged with housing juveniles in the state. So my understanding would be there would be an agreement similar to other counties that don't have a juvenile center. So there are multiple counties in the 46 counties that do not have and do not provide a juvenile center. So what would happen is there would be an agreement, generally speaking, there would be a per diem that's charged, and the county would have to pay their per diem for DJJ to then house those juveniles on behalf of Richland County.
Okay, just one follow-up. Do you have a sense for, like, what is the percentage of ASG's population of detainees that are juveniles, and then a sense of, like, how many staff might be freed up if the juvenile center was closed?
I do have that information. I think it would be better communicated by the Detention Center Director if you would permit me to have him come to the microphone to address that directly.
Yes, thanks.
Mr. Pugh.
Mr. Harvey, you recognize?
Thank you, County Council. Yes, Mr. Branham. So currently we have 27 juveniles right now that's in our custody. We have 14 staff that's providing care, custody, and control for them. So if once your approval of closing down the facility, those 14 staff will be shifted to the adult side where we could put them in coverage in our transportation unit, in our intake unit, all of those areas where we're not up to standard like we would like it to be.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Madam Chair, you recognize?
Thank you. Administrator Brown, and I don't know if Greenville is the only example we have, but if we move forward with this type of request, is it something that we would have to do every year? Like, can you do it just indefinitely, or what typically is the time frame and process when you make the request?
So my understanding is it's technically not a request because the responsibility lies with the Department of Juvenile Justice. And so what we will be doing in this process and what we're doing now is we're being courteous, we're being considerate, we're talking through it to figure out whether or not it makes sense for our body. And we're also communicating in a public way this discussion so that if members of, for example, the Department of Juvenile Justice want to talk more about, hey, Richland County, if you're considering doing that, here's what the agreement will look like, then we can start having those conversations. But my understanding is that today, as you and I sit here now, that it is not the responsibility of Richland County, and thus you would want to have good relationships, but we do not have to continue to house juveniles. Again, like many of the counties in the state of South Carolina do not house juveniles because it is not their responsibility.
Thank you. That definitely helps clarify moving forward. I think based upon all the work that we've put in and what we've been doing at the detention center, and we know what we want to continue to do, and knowing our issues with staffing, I think it makes sense to, you know, have the juveniles be where they should be and let that department handle them, and we focus on our detention center responsibilities and focusing on staffing and update our facility as needed. I'm not on this committee, so I was just sharing my thoughts because I can't make a vote. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Mr. Administrator, yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. And again, the conversation today was really to start talking about taking an operational look. We've already laid out all the plans for the Department of Corrections. We're trying to continue to improve in the areas that we've identified, and this is just the next step, right? To actually address the thing that folks have out there. The detention center needs to be better. The detention center needs to focus on improvements. The detention center needs to focus on their staffing. Well, yes, and this is how we do all of those things, is we focus on the responsibilities that we have, and this is one of those conversations. So I appreciate you all, having the conversation. I understand that for some folks, it's a tough conversation to have because of the nature. Anytime you're dealing with individuals and people, there is always some concern that we share amongst each other. But the ideal here is to, again, educate and inform so that you all can consider the request that we're making as we go forward with any issues related to the detention center as a whole. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for considering the item. And again, we'll take any additional questions that you may have. But I believe that's all we have to present in terms of the initial request.
Need any action from the committee, sir?
So staff's recommendation is that we move forward with the closure of the juvenile facility. So if the committee is ready to consider that staff request, then you are more than welcome to take that action. If you would want to not do that, you want to get some, whatever the case may be, it is our recommendation that we move forward with focusing on our responsibilities, which is not the juvenile detention side of the house.
I would like for us to go into executive sessions with the attorney so we can ask a few questions. Can I get a motion for executive session?
Move for executives.
Second.
Pugh,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Can I get a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Pugh,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. We were in executive session to receive advice from our county attorney. We did not take a vote while we were in executive session. Can I? Yes, ma'am.
I move to accept the staff's recommendation for the closing of the youth part of the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center.
Motion. Second. Any discussion? No discussion. Madam Clerk, call for the vote, please.
Pugh,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 4A3. Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So this particular item, we do an annual, arranging of an opportunity for you all to visit the facility. That is another one of the compliance standards that is listed in the minimum jail standards. And so many of you have already been to the facility multiple times and also this year. But it is still an annual process that we are required to do. So you are invited officially. And so you should receive something from me officially inviting you, and know again that that's just part of the minimum standards. So again, for those people who don't know, all of County Council has been to the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. Many of them have been multiple times. But again, this is just a requirement, a compliance requirement. And in order to fulfill that requirement, we have to have a formal acknowledgement of an invitation and the arrangements that are being made for you to participate in visiting the facility. That's all of the report, Mr. Chair. We're certainly taking any questions about that particular item or anything else that's been listed on today's agenda.
Mr. Brown, is there any questions or concerns from any of my colleagues or members? Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for that informative update.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 5 on the agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Pugh,
Yes,
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
we are now.